Welcome to the Relational Lives podcast. I'm Ali.
And I'm Roz.
And we're both psychotherapists.
This is a podcast about the complexities of relationships and how trauma, attachment, and lived experience shape how we love and connect.
Because relationships are rarely simple, and we want to give you the understanding to unlock your relationship's full potential.
If you enjoy this show, please give us a 5-star review and subscribe on whatever platform you are listening on. This also means you'll get notified when new episodes come out.
And we enjoy engaging with our listeners, so do reach out with your comments, or you can email us at relationallives@gmail.com.
Hi, Ali.
Hi, Roz.
So today we're doing a slightly shorter and different episode, aren't we? Because we want to introduce our listeners to what we're going to be doing going forward, which is going to be slightly different than what we've been doing already.
Yeah.
We've had lots of people, haven't we, write comments and write into us saying how they've really loved, or how you've really loved, who is listening to us, our couples episodes. And so that is going to be our kind of focus going forward.
Yeah, we're gonna zoom in on this topic in particular, and particularly for couples where things are not easy. I mean, most couples, things aren't easy, but we're talking about couples who really experience it's severe difficulties, so it could be addictions, depression, anxiety disorders, lots of areas where it really brings another element to the couple dynamic.
Yes, and we'll hopefully be shining a light on some of those things and also breaking them down. There are things that we can feel sometimes in our difficult relationship, when our relationships are in difficulties, where, for instance, we might feel shame or we're kind of having to deal with a betrayal of some kind. So there are so many areas that I think would be helpful for you all to listen to, and we will try and break down for you.
And we're going to have our Dear Therapist episodes where we read out listeners' difficulties, dilemmas, and talk about them and explore them together. So do let us know if you have something you'd like us to explore. You can email us at relationallives@gmail.com, or there should be, whoever you're watching this, there should be the link to our anonymous form. Either in the bio or in the comments. We'll make sure we put it in there, or there's show notes.
Yes, excellent. That would be really good. So I think it might be helpful to sort of elaborate a little bit on how we work as therapists, perhaps, in terms of how we think about what happens in couple dynamics when things are really difficult and where that might come from.
Yeah, so some of what we're going to be talking about is where we are making sense of how our past experiences, whether that be childhood or adulthood, past relationships, influence how we show up in our current relationships. And a lot of people come to us, Roz, don't they? I certainly experience this, and they say, I don't want to go to the past. What's the point? It's done. There's no point going back. I can't change it.
Yeah. And also that kind of comment sometimes I get isn't therapy is just always about going into your childhood.
Yeah.
And it's not quite, of course we explore that. Of course we try and understand, but actually it's not all to do with that, is it?
No, it's definitely not. It's not about just walking around in your pain from your childhood and just talking about it again and again and again. Because actually I think that's probably can be quite damaging.
Yes, because we're kind of repeating and telling the same story without actually doing something different, aren't we? And that's really important. That's a really good point. And I think helpful maybe for you listening to this to understand a little bit about what therapy is about, and it isn't doing that. Yes, of course, we have to explore some of what we're doing in the present, how the difficulties showing up in your couple relationship, what comes up for each person in that. And of course that can be influenced by what has happened in our past, like Ali says, whether that's in your childhood or whether it's in your experiences in relationships or young adulthood or wherever. It's just something that's in the past that we're bringing into the present and haven't been able to resolve.
Yeah. Yeah, because the experiences we've had when we're younger in the past it's all gone into our body and sort of wired this map within us about how we see ourselves and the world. And so this is the lens at which we are looking through our relationship. And it's not always helpful. So unless you can understand it and start to change that within you, it's going to, in some way, probably be quite damaging.
Yeah. Especially if you're listening to this and you've experienced that there's a sort of, you notice a pattern that's gone on with your relationships. There's a kind of a repetition of the similar type of experiences. And often that can be a sign, I think, that, something needs to be addressed. Something needs to change if that's not working each time it's going round the same loop again.
Yeah. Or if you feel like sometimes when you're going through conflict with your partner and you're feeling like this feels familiar. This feeling to me is not the first time I've felt this. It's not the first time I've experienced this. It feels young. It feels familiar. That
Yeah.
can be a sign as well.
Yeah. Good point. So this is what we're hoping to kind of cover, isn't it, in our episodes going forward. And I think, as Ali said earlier, it would be so good if more people can write in with different dilemmas, because not only can we do the Dear Couples Therapist episodes, but we can also take some of the themes that are coming through that we know that you're wanting to understand a bit more about yourself, understand more about your relationship, so that hopefully you can take that into your relationship and make it different and better. Build those bonds a bit more than you've been able to perhaps come a bit closer to each other.
Is it worth us mentioning, Ros, maybe giving some examples? Again, we hear lots of stories in our therapy rooms, maybe giving some examples of how someone's past experiences are showing up in the present. So people listening might be able to think, okay, that makes sense.
I think in terms of one behavior that we could see perhaps happening within couples relationships is where you've said, one of the episodes we'll cover is on addiction. So whether that's sex addiction, whether that's alcohol, drugs, whatever that addiction, porn addiction, when there's addiction in a relationship, invariably there is something underneath that. Where has that come from, that person is needing to be absorbed in, or yes, I don't know another word actually off the top of my head, but absorbed in that behavior. And often when we unpick and understand that person has experienced in their lives that has led them into that addiction, often we can start making sense of the meaning of that addiction in a different way, rather than, okay, yes, lots of people I know go to AA perhaps, and will find that really, really helpful. But the therapy part of it, I think, is looking at the underlying stuff that's led to it.
Yeah.
So that's an example, I think, where we would sort of unpick that within our therapy work with a couple, not only understanding the addiction, but also understanding what that has meant for the partner who is not the addict, if you like, so looking at that dynamic and how it plays out.
Yeah. Yeah. A good example of this, if we sort of bring it to life a little bit, would be someone who perhaps felt like they didn't belong when they were young. They were That's my
Anybody
cat
who's
that's
watching
just come
this,
in the
well,
room.
I was going to say, just see Ali's cat coming through the window.
They might felt like they didn't belong, and they, at the age of 15, maybe younger, they found alcohol or drugs, and they found that through alcohol or drugs they found a community, they found their confidence through that, and that is the start that can be the start of someone's addiction.
Yeah, and this is where we say in sessions, isn't it, Ali? Frequently, I often find myself saying it makes so much sense. When we put some understanding into what has led to whatever's happening in the present, and in this example that you've given, somebody sort of turning towards alcohol, it can then be very de-shaming in that experience. It doesn't mean to say that you don't want to change, that things need to change, that it's not a healthy thing to be doing now, but it makes sense of the strategy that was used to kind of protect yourself in the past.
Yeah.
And this is what's so helpful, I think, to understand for people.
Yeah. Why would you have not enjoyed that when it gives you a sense of belonging and a confidence that you haven't experienced?
Yeah.
That is just so understandable.
It is. However, I think the point of this also is that, with that the belief that, you sort of don't belong somewhere, of course, that still exists.
Yeah, that's still in there.
It's still in there. And you were saying, when we were talking about this, Ali, you were saying about that sort of thing in the body that happens, that memory in our body and our minds still remains. And that's why we have to start looking at doing something different with that, to build up something different, go back to that place where we understand that belief and can think about how we're going to change it in the present.
Yeah, because you don't want to have to use alcohol for the rest of your life in order to feel confident and like you belong. That's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. So it's meeting ourselves differently in the present, isn't it? It's understanding ourselves more. It's being able to make sense of why we do the things that we do. And that, we're using an example of addiction in this, but this can be all sorts of different behaviors and different things that happen. Betrayal, all sorts of things that come in, disordered eating. There are all sorts of elements that can come into relationships and bring difficulties with it because they are unresolved elements of the past that we're carrying into the future. And the present.
Yeah, and the future, possibly.
And the future, possibly, if you don't deal with them.
Past episode and the rest.
That's an invitation for everybody. Yeah. So this is what we're going to be doing.
We are. Yeah. We're going to be helping you understand and unpick all of this complex stuff around relationships and how we can help you to have the potential for a great relationship.
Yeah.
So we hope that you stay with us for this new focus. Even if you're not in a relationship and you want to be in one, this might be helpful for you. So stay tuned and do let us know if there's any topics you'd like us to cover.
And yes, please remember, we really want to get this out to as many people as possible. So not only, share when you can, but perhaps even say to your friends to listen. If you know people who are in situations where you think they might benefit from these episodes, please do share. The more we can get it out, the better.
Have you seen that amazing podcast? Have you heard that amazing podcast, Relational Lives? And then send them the link.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, stay with us and we look forward to you being on this experience with us.
Yeah. All right. See you soon, Roz.
See you soon, Ali.